guys, so Megan Hannett, my sister, was kind enough to tag me in the Jane Austen July book tag. This was originally posted by Marissa from Blatantly Bookish, so thank you to Marissa for creating this and Megan for tagging me. I know, Megan, you were a little uncertain whether I would want to do it. I actually was looking at the questions even before you tagged me, so I am glad you tagged me. Thank you. Oh, and just a quick little disclaimer at the beginning. I've actually only read Pride and Prejudice and Emma. I have a pretty good knowledge of Sense and Sensibility's plot and characters, and then like basic knowledge of the other three. My weakest one is probably actually Persuasion, with Northanger Abbey being only slightly above that one. But yeah, just so you're aware going into this, I'm going to be focusing mainly in on the three that I mentioned because those are the three that I actually know. Okay, so question number one, what is your favorite Jane Austen book? I'm going to go with the probably, I would say, the most obvious one, although some people might disagree, and that is Pride and Prejudice. I read this one when I was in high school and I just love it. I love Elizabeth, I love Darcy, I love their dynamic. I really love the characters in this book, in particular, of course, Darcy and Elizabeth, but everyone is really well written. I actually like what she does with Mrs. Bennet, because even she has some interesting backstory despite being one of the less developed characters in the story, and even like the relationship between her and her husband. Like everyone gets some development, which I really like. And question number two, who is your favorite Jane Austen protagonist? Again, going off of what I was just talking about, Elizabeth Bennet. I really love her journey as a character. I like how she starts out as being a good person, but she has some definite flaws that she's not actually aware of. And then she goes through a really major character arc through her relationship with Darcy. And I especially like how romance in this book is portrayed through these two as being kind of a way to become a better person. They kind of help each other to get past their flaws, because she does the same thing for him, and I love it. Honorable mention, though, to Eleanor Dashwood from Sense and Sensibility, who I also really like. Question number three, name a book off your shelves you think Jane would wholeheartedly approve of. I actually had a really hard time with this one, just because I don't tend to have a lot of books of this type. I tend to have a lot of fantasy, a lot of that kind of thing, which, yes, Jane Austen could wholeheartedly approve of, but I don't know her well enough to assume that. So I ended up going with The Raven Master by Chris Scaife. This is one of the very few non-fiction books I actually have. It's about the man who takes care of the ravens at the Tower of London. And it's really, really interesting. But the reason why I picked it is because it deals with real life, but in a really interesting way. And that's one thing I really like about Jane Austen. Her stuff isn't actually, real. It didn't happen, but it feels like something that could have happened. And it's written in a really entertaining way. I love how he describes the personalities of the different ravens. For instance, Merlina gets along with him very much, whereas Moonin hates him. And it's funny hearing the dynamic between all of them described. So yeah, this would be my pick. Also a book I'd recommend incidentally. It's really good. Number four, name a book off your shelf you think Jane would have hated and why. I decided to go with Artemis Fowl because it's basically the antithesis of everything in Jane Austen's books. It has a very different tone. The sci-fi fantasy theme comes up a lot. It has some very almost outlandish scenarios, even if it's described in a way that seems realistic in this world. So yeah, I love this book. I love Pride and Prejudice, but they're different enough that I think this is probably the best fit, despite the fact that there's a lot of books on my shelf that could fit. That was actually the hardest thing about this question, was which one do I go with? And question number four, who is your favorite minor Jane Austen character and why? Now, when I was originally thinking about this, my first thought was Charlotte Lucas from Pride and Prejudice. I love how intelligent and cunning she is, because she doesn't exactly have the most advantageous situation, but she figures out how to make it work for herself, and she actually has I would deem a fairly happy ending. It's not like gloriously happy like Elizabeth's, but she can have a decently happy life, I think, with how she ends the story. However, I was thinking about it some more, and then I was just kind of sitting there one day thinking, and all of a sudden it popped into my head. I know exactly who has to go with this question. And that is Margaret Dashwood from Sense and Sensibility. I love Margaret. I love how she has this very, very adventurous spirit and huge imagination. And her relationship with Edward is just adorable, and I love it. It's really fun seeing them interact. I actually really love it in the Emma Thompson movie, the dynamic between Margaret and Edward. It's adorable, and I love it. And then there's also the fact that I kind of relate to her in some ways, because she's the youngest of three sisters, and I am as well. So that kind of always drew my attention to that character as well. And number six, name a book off of your shelf that you feel was inspired by Jane Austen and why. For me, I decided to go with Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. The feel of this book really reminds me of Jane Austen, in particular how well she describes sisters and relates to them, because, you read Pride and Prejudice, there's sisters all over the place, same with Sense and Sensibility, siblings are everywhere. and that's a huge focus of this book, obviously, hence the title. This one does have a little bit less of a romance focus than Jane Austen does, but it's still there. And then just the fact that it kind of goes through their everyday lives, but in a really interesting way, and kind of shows you how these characters grow and change over time. That's kind of what this reminds me of. And incidentally, I actually got to play Beth in a stage production of Little Women, and that's why I have this particular copy. It actually has a note in the front, and it's signed by a couple of the crew members. So yeah, this copy in particular I love very much. And number 7, name a Jane Austen character you love to hate. This was the easiest one for me to answer. George Wickham. I really hate George Wickham from Pride and Prejudice. He's a very fun character to hate though, because there's just so many things you can go through. He just is so horrible to everyone, but he knows that he's charming and he uses that. And it makes him so, like, such an evil character in the book. Like, he comes across more as than just strictly evil. But at the same time, it's like, what did Darcy ever do to you? I mean, yeah, he stepped in when you were doing some horrible stuff, but that's not a reason to be like, that's literally the exact opposite of an excuse. So yeah, I really hate George Wickham. Special mention here should also go to John Willoughby from Sense and Sensibility, but the reason I tend to like him more than George Wickham is because John Willoughby has a bit more depth, and also, yeah, his actual actions go farther than Wickham's, but I feel like Wickham, if he hadn't been stopped by Darcy, would have done exactly the same thing as Willoughby, possibly worse. So yeah, that's my opinion on that. But anyway, thank you guys for watching. If you have any questions regarding my choices or answers, please feel free to mention it down below, and I will answer you the best I can. I'm going to tag Naomi from Naomi's Bookshelf. I know you've already been tagged, but I really want you to do this one, so I'm going to tag you as well. And I'm also going to tag Krista from Books and Gems. I'm not sure if you've already done this one, but I'm interested to hear your answers, so if you haven't, then I tag you. No pressure, of course. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching. Have a lovely day. See you later.